So today's agenda, just a quick welcome, and I think we'll do just a round of introductions. Our topic for today is around what are effective strategies to engage leaders at municipal or regional level so that we can get our issue on the agenda. We're going to just do a round of check-ins just so we know who's on the line today. And then we'll get into our presentation with Calgary and Calgary Transit as an example of a really successful strategy. We'll get into a discussion and then wrap up with some closing announcements. So let's just start with, it's always nice to know who's on the line. If we could please just do a round of check-ins as you're coming on. If you don't mind just unmuting yourself and introducing yourself, where you're calling in from, and what your role is. I could just start calling people out if that's easier, but sometimes I can't see, people's names aren't coming up. We could start with Terry.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, sorry. So I did kind of do a little intro. So,
yes.
But yeah, so I'm from Simcoe Muskoka, so the Barrie, South Simcoe, Alliston, Tottenham, and we have a chronic disease prevention program. So we are starting to work more with our we always work and engage with our municipalities, but we're going to be looking at more of a health equity lens and how they can, look at their policies or programs that they have in place around maybe transportation, jobs, economic development, affordable housing, how they can just look at what they're already doing and the successes they've had in place. When I think of transportation, I think of in the town of Innisfil, they have Uber that they're putting in place. And one thing they just announced, I believe, and I just don't want to say the wrong thing, but they're cutting the fares in half for low-income users so they can get around town to areas they need to get to. So that's a strategy they're using. So yeah, just looking at what is in place and how they can build on what they're doing to help continue to put more money in people's pockets so they can have enough money to buy food. So I just wanted to know a little bit more about working with municipalities and successes and challenges. So thanks for the invite.
That's great. Thanks for sharing that, Terry.
Thank you.
Okay. Next person, I'm actually just going down my list who I see on my screen. I see Tim is here.
Yeah, hi. Hope you can hear me all right. It's
yes.
Tim Stiles. I work for the Federation of Canadian Municipalities, and so we're the national association that represents municipal government. So obviously this is very in line with what we do at FCM, and we engage municipal leaders, our elected officials, all the time. I'm a policy analyst, and we divide our files in a number of ways, but I support the Social and Economic Development Committee, and so poverty reduction and accessibility issues and homelessness are all part of my portfolio. And we also work a lot on transit issues, so that a lot of intersecting things here, and just being able to understand what kinds of best practices are out there and how people are engaging their local government is what I'm interested in hearing today for sure. And I'm normally in Ottawa, but I'm traveling this week, so my offices are based in Ottawa.
Great, thanks for sharing, Tim. It's great you're on board. I was just going to quickly say, I know that I was looking at the FCM website. I know that one of the platforms for the election this year has been about building better public transit. And correct me if I'm wrong here, calling for a permanent federal funding mechanism.
Oh yeah, that's one of the top three big pushes from this federal election. So we're eager to get going with this next government in the 43rd Parliament.
Great. Okay. Thank you. We've got another caller. I'm going to call it this person who's calling in from, it's a phone number 250 starts with. That's the area code. I don't know where that is.
828-3582, Kamloops.
Yes, there. That's why I would
my
know.
name is.
Welcome.
Hi, everybody. My name's Ben Schobader. I work for the city of Kamloops. We just instituted a subsidized bus pass program. This past September 3rd was the first day of it, and so we're just keeping track of all sorts of things that are going on around transportation, and that was one of our latest initiatives with it within the city.
Great. Okay, great. Thanks, Ben. Okay, next person. I think it's Dawn.
Hi.
Hi.
Yeah, I'm Don Cowler. I'm in Port Hardy, BC, which is at the northern end of Vancouver Island. I'm a family consultant with the BC Community Poverty Reduction Initiative, which is a partnership between the provincial government and local governments.
Oh, that's great. Thank you, Don. Okay, next person I think is Elaine.
Hi, everybody. Sorry, I'm a bit late. I was having sound trouble with my computer. My name's Elaine Capes, and I am from Dufferin County, which is central west Ontario. Our boundaries are mixed all over the place for different services. I coordinate 3 pillars. One of those is our DCEC, Dufferin County Equity Collaborative, renamed from Poverty Reduction Task Force. And transportation is a huge issue that comes up for us. And I noticed that that was a conversation that was happening today, but also what's key is how to get the ear of local politicians so that they listen and take action when you need them to. So.
Great. That's a good question. Okay, thank you, Elaine. Next person, Stephen.
Hi.
Hello.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, I just signed on.
We're just asking people just to identify themselves, where you're calling from, and even if you want to add a little bit of context to anything you're working on around transit locally.
Oh, great. Okay, yep. Stephen Lynn. I'm the coordinator of social planning with the City of Windsor, responsible for Pathway to Potential. That's Windsor, Ontario, and we've had a transit affordable bus pass for many years, but one of the things I'm really interested in is just looking at trying to consolidate the eligibility for our low-income programming. And I think this idea of like the sliding scale and is really important. And the other thing is that our transit department has just approved free ridership for ages 0 to 12 that I know is already operating in other municipalities, but that's a really big deal. It's finally going to council. And so they just completed a fare review and also are doing a service delivery review, which is going to transform our system over the next number of years. So a lot of good stuff happening here in Windsor.
That's great. Thanks for sharing that, Stephen. It's good to hear those updates. Okay, I know there's somebody else who maybe just came on. I think someone.
Yeah.
Oh, hello.
Hello, this
Hello.
is Jill Zacharias from
Hi.
the city of Revelstoke. Hi,
Welcome.
in BC. And yeah, interested to hear what everyone has to say about transit. We just, our poverty reduction efforts here in the last 6 months have just morphed into collective impact. And we have a super engaged transit and transportation action team. And we are looking at, also in the next couple of years, a complete reboot, revamp of our transit system here, also going through a service review, but in the context of trying to combine a couple of different transit systems. and like, because we are also a resort municipality, so we've got like the ski bus shuttle, which is super oversubscribed, and then we have a regular transit system, which rides around the town empty. So we need to kind of, and we're just a small community, so to increase efficiencies and but I'm super interested in kind of low-income transit passes, free transit, and all that kind of stuff as well. So the call here today is quite timely.
Great, thanks for joining us, Jill. Anybody else who I've missed, just in case? Is there anybody else who hasn't? I think there's a few people who said that they'll be joining it a little bit late, so we'll just get things going. And sorry, I moved to the next slide too quickly. I'd like to welcome Bonnie Picard and Connie Houston from Calgary, who are going to be, oh, there you can see them. Sure. And they're going to be talking about, giving us some history about what's been happening around transit in Calgary, and sharing some of the learning, some of their successes, and some challenges. Perhaps there's some current challenges happening right now in the province. So I'm going to hand it over. You can give a little bit more of a background about yourselves. I'm going to move it over to your first slide, but I'll let you do a little introduction as well. Over to you.
Okay, thanks so much, Elle. My name is Bonnie Picard. I'm with Fair Affairs, co-chair with CoP, and I've been involved with the low-income transit pass Fair Affairs for 20 years. We've been doing this. Started off, I was on the provincial board for personal mental disabilities, and we were looking at that time at affordable transportation for people on AISH, which is our government pension plan for people with disabilities. Soon realized that we, first of all, when we were starting to look at transportation, we just started looking at it for people that were the AISH, and soon realized that it was not a program issue, but it was a policy issue. So we decided to open it up to anyone living on income, and so that's from there. The rest is history, and we'll talk about that as our slides today.
And I'm Colleen Houston. I'm a member of the Disability Action Hall, and we're a group of people with disabilities and allies who works towards social justice since 1998.
Okay, so I guess we'll just start with our slide, shall we, Al? Just jump in. Okay, so our first slide is just talking about who Fair Affairs is and who Fair Calgary Community Voices is. So we're a group of citizens. Some of the people on our committee are living on low income. Some are community organizers such as myself, and service providers. We work with cities, community neighborhood services, Calgary Transit, towards affordable access transit. We have two teams. We started out with Fair Affairs many years ago. And we quickly realized that we also needed to engage the agencies that were working with people that were living in poverty. So we created Fair Calgary Community Voices, which is our larger collective that gives us a bigger reach into the community.
And Fair Calgary Community Voices also aligns with the Fair Calgary policy. So I heard a couple of people talking about policy. So Robert Wiles with the City of Calgary is one people, and Carla Cote, who've changed and updated that policy to what's known as a social well-being policy. And it's a much bigger lens than what the Fair Calgary policy used to be. So I think people might be interested in seeing that if they don't already have a lens that looks at equity in a larger context, which I think some of the people are quite interested in today. So we'll try and get their permission to pass on those contacts to you.
Yeah, so Fair Calgary Community Voices is basically, Fair Calgary, as Colleen said, I should have mentioned that, is the municipal city City of Calgary department that we are advising to and working with.
And then we just have a current campaign called Transit for All. So we just want to be a little bit more transparent with you, but we've got a big challenge ahead of us on Monday, trying to get a $6.5 million funding gap addressed. This is Calgary, where we're facing property tax increases and largest unemployment we've had in quite a long time.
And also the campaign is to ensure that the fares for the sliding scale remain affordable, because the city's answer to bridging the $6.5 million funding gap for the sliding scale is to increase fares. And we have a solution that we'd like to see is that the city match the funding that the province has put in for the sliding scale.
The province is providing $4.5 million for the next years between the cities of Calgary and Edmonton. And we're not sure where they're at addressing the needs in the smaller cities and rural communities around operational funds. And we know that BC, Saskatchewan, and parts of Ontario have operational funding, but it sounds like only for seniors, only for people with disabilities, and not people based on low income.
Based on need, yeah.
Yeah, based on need.
Right. Okay.
So I guess we'll go to the next slide.
Yeah.
If that's great. Okay.
Any questions, or should we address questions at the end?
Yeah, do you want to ask questions as we go or at the end? What would work for people?
Whichever works for everybody.
We're open to either.
If you wouldn't mind, it's Tim Stiles here. Just a quick question. I missed the name of the policy that the City of Calgary put out when you were mentioning there were 2 employees from the city, and there was a kind of equity policy. What was that called again?
Called the social well-being policy. So if you go under calgary.ca and go under policies, you'll see it's called the social well-being policy. So it looks at it through the lens of, I can't remember all 11 areas, but age is one, culture, income,
equity,
disability, equity. So that it's just an updated version that's a little bit more inclusive and looking at it through, say, the Charter of Human Rights and Freedoms. So there also was an advisory tied to that group, and so we've actually utilized the advisory because we are also faced with the challenges, our fare structure based on equity. So this advisory is available to council to kind of vent their policies and decisions that they're about to make. And so we're expecting a report, which we don't know if it's public or not, to be released to council today. If basing just having a separate fare structure for seniors and a separate fare structure for youth versus based on need is really fair. And so they've actually had that discussion, but we're not privy to that report.
We haven't seen the results yet.
No. So it's interesting to have an advisory tied to this policy as well, because it's just another tool available to citizens.
The original department that we were working with was called Fair Calgary, and it was the department where we started to work with Robert Wiles to be able to ensure that the city's policies around transportation was available to all people, all citizens, because it's a public transportation system after all. So that's where we first started Fair Calgary Community Voices, was around the Fair Calgary initiative.
I'm just gonna, if you don't mind, I'm just gonna find the policy and see if I can send it in a chat note. Okay, if that's okay.
Great, thank you.
Okay, great. So we'll move on while Colleen's doing that to building community through stories. Actually, that's you.
Okay, so one of the things we talked about some of our highlights because we've been doing this work for 20 years. And so one of my favorite stories is from Katie Gerke. And she is a full-time mechanical or automated wheelchair user and lives at a long-term care facility. And it was one of the most transformational moments was when she spoke to council.
She was on our committee.
And she was on as well. She's a kid in a candy shop. And this was at the time when we had a pilot. And the faces of this council completely transformed. He was a relatable citizen. we've noticed over many years when people who are directly impacted by the idea of affordable transit based on need, when they hear directly from people, they drop their pens, they drop their phones, and their head and eye contact is with that individual. And we find that far more effective than having charts and surveys and graphs. They basically now present to council, their eyes kind of glass over. And but when a citizen takes that time out of their day to come and talk to council, it really, really, I think, motivates council that this is aligned with the policies and of the work.
I just want to give a bit of history so you have some context. Our group met from 2000 to 2005 and worked on a provincial policy to see if we could get the province to pay for operational funding for a low-income transportation program for all cities, municipalities in Alberta. The province actually refused to do that, so the City of Calgary stepped up, and in 2005, the city did a pilot for people on AISH just to fund a low-income transportation program. And that transportation program, the first one was based on 75% of LICO. In 2006, they moved to all people living on low income, not just people on AISH, and still at 75%. So we've had to do step-by-step work on this program to where it is today. So our first piece of work was to get the low-income transit pass to be at 100% of which we managed to do. I can't remember the year we did that. The second thing that people came to us that we're working with and said that because the program originally was people 18 to 64 years of age, people in the city actually that were working with youth said they wanted the youth from the ages of 6 to 18 to also be included in the low-income transit pass. So that was our next piece of work, and the City of Calgary acknowledged and funded that as well. So then our next piece of work, it's been, like I say, a step-by-step. The next piece of work was to the sliding scale. So up to just a few years ago, or 2017, our low-income transit pass was always at 50% of the regular adult transit pass. So every year it goes up a little bit. Right now, I think the regular adult transit pass is 103, something like that. So the low-income transit pass would have been half of that. And we found that people living at different levels of poverty are not able to afford that. We went to the city and did the asked for a sliding scale, and the province and the city partnered on that to make that happen. The other thing that we did was we helped to get the fair entry program in place, which before this time, there was 6 or 7 low or subsidized programs within the City of Calgary, and each subsidized program, a person would go and apply separately. Mm-hmm. So we lobbied to get the entry program where it was a single score, single entry, and so that also was something that we worked with the city on.
Right. So for example, say you had a pet and it needed to be spayed or neutered. For bus pass, you had the option of signing up, and they had a whole bunch of different types of eligibility criteria, different levels of income, and so now it was quite centralized, and that was a really significant step to make us a counter to apply for all these systems, and not just at City Hall, but online as well. There are some challenges, of course, with the I work with using online and people not having credit cards, that system. So there are some challenges but face-to-face obviously works for people that have that kind of time. So I just wanted to say that we work mostly in story format because we've just seen that being quite effective, but we've also used surveys as well, and used, we'll get into some of those tools a bit later.
Okay. I think we have a question. No questions? Okay.
Or Suzanne, maybe?
Okay, our dog wants to join in. Okay, so, all right, if there's no questions, we can move on. the story format. So building community through stories, I think Colleen has talked about that. We aim to bridge the gap between people living in poverty and city council and city administration. So we see ourselves as kind of the, what did you call us earlier?
Well, I think we're more of a safe space,
Mm-hmm.
and we kind of help people, kind of help collect that information, that even though the information is all available online for people how to talk to council and when that meeting is, lots of people don't have kind of time to figure out where that is. So we kind of keep our ear to the ground on what's kind of coming up. And that's kind of one of our full-time passions, is looking at certain agendas. Like, let's say this is not even on the radar with your council or with your regional collectives, looking at those agendas and go, oh, this is sort of related, like I'm not going to be out of order speaking on this topic. And so sometimes you can kind of bend agendas to your liking if you aren't able to put in something through a public process.
I just wanted to mention also that Fair Fairs and Fair Calgary Community Voices we're not affiliated with any agency. So we are grassroots, and we are able then to be quite nimble, especially Fair Fairs, in responding to issues that come up quite quickly from the city in regards to the low-income transit pass. One of the other things is that our meetings are open to anyone, and we really want to be able to have anyone at the table that has an interest. We find that there's lots of people bring lots of strengths and really great stories. And people come and go because it's very grassroots. And so if a person or a community wants to join for a while, that's fine, and they may not have the time or interest after that. So people come from all walks of life. It's very important that we have people that have that have a lived experience of living in poverty at the table, and by any means see them as token, because their stories, as Colleen said, are very important.
Yeah, like it's really important. Like just because you have the policy, you need to be a watchdog. Like you need to know, is that policy really working well? So I think back in 2014 maybe, the policy came in place, and some of our partners said, well, it's in place now and we're going to go and do this other work. The problem is that we found that half price, which we know some centers have, wasn't working for people. They found half price of the adult fare was still not affordable. People were still walking to work and to get to the community, and people are still in crisis. And yes, we have like a single bus ticket that was given away in the shelters, but that was again a response. But we found that people just said that it was laborious trying to apply. It still is actually not the best program to apply. Like there's still improvements need to be done, but that's when the concept of sliding scale really took off, because we had many people in poverty just struggling to get around their community. So it's so important to make sure you have the people that buy that pass informing the work and policy direction. And often I've seen lots of collectives really only just focus on policy members and not the value of people who buy that pass or could buy that transit pass.
So the sliding scale is, I'll just give you a little bit of information on that. It is,
I'll find it.
Okay. The sliding scale, we started it with 3 bands. Band A is for people that are living in extreme poverty, people that are homeless, up to the income of our Alberta Works program, or welfare in Alberta. So up to $12,960. For those people, they pay $5.30 a month. For Band B, people that are earning or up to $22,000 a year, they pay $37 a month. And people that are in Band C that are receiving up to $26,000, they pay $53 a month. And right now, the city is recommending that Band A move from $5.30 a month to $18.55 a month. So that's the work that we're doing right now, is working with the city to keep the fares at the same price or slightly higher, but not increase it by 250%. So that's our sliding scale. Okay, well, we can move on then.
Thanks, Elle. We'll go to the next slide. That's okay. So Lloyd, he's a member of the Action Hall, and he just talked quite eloquently about how the bus is his lifeline. And this really rang true with council when somebody there takes the time to talk about whose only choice of getting around is taking the bus. And so we've often quoted Lloyd in our work about why this work matters. And we've talked quite a bit about how it's baby steps with our work, doing this for 20 years. It's really difficult to look at success from month to month, and
it takes a lot of time.
It takes a lot of time, yes.
It's important to stay with it. That's one of the things that we find that works with our the way that we our committee works, is that Colleen and I are able to continue to be the point people for the low-income transit pass, whereas if you're with an agency or you are working more on program funding or programs and or projects, and so you have to move on to another project perhaps if the funding for that ends. But really recommend if you're really working on something that's important, that you hand it over to community people to continue the work if you're not able to, because it's not a short-term project by any means. As Colleen talked about, important to keep a history of the work as well, and again ask somebody in the group to do that work, because there's so much work to be done that you need to really have a lot of people within the group taking on different aspects of the work.
Yeah, like very often we've had organizations join us and they have to leave because there's a change in their mandate. We certainly do work with organizations, like I work at an organization, but the mandate where I work is driven by the people with disabilities. So we've had funding for the last 20 years, which gives me capacity to say, sit in this office today and use this computer, have meetings, and keeping our ear to the ground. So again, that's a collective approach that I'm sure people are quite familiar with, is to that blend of a really rich, diverse group.
I just mentioned too that one of the things that has been very crucial to our group is having representatives from the city on our committee. We really try and have a representative at all times. Robert Wiles has been with us for a number of years now, and he advises when things are going to council or when there's new policy or there's things that are happening at the city level that we need to be able to respond to. Because Colleen and I are with Fair Fares and we're basically the point people for that, we can respond quite quickly, sometimes within a day. We've had to rally the troops and go to city council to speak on something that we've just found out might be happening. Very important to keep your ear to the ground, as we talked about earlier, and know what's happening at all times with city council. Colleen is really great at monitoring city council website and their agendas and their meetings. They have a standing policy committee meeting called Transit and Transportation that we speak to quite often, and we bring the people from our committee and from the community to speak to them. So, but it's important that we know that those meetings are actually happening, so that we can let our members know that to come and to speak about a particular issue that's being addressed.
And probably one of the biggest challenges we've had in the last 2 years is when council said to us, well, we like the idea of the sliding scale, but can you go talk to the province? And so because we've been here for 20 years, it's not our first time talking to the province. We've had kind of a two-pronged strategy and we see the sliding scale and those costs shared by the city and the province, and even actually at the national level. And so we've also talked to some of the people in BC who are interested in a national transportation strategy. And so I'm very excited to see lots of people here from Ontario and BC on the line, because it's definitely a concern about how do we fund this. In Alberta, we're kind of an austere budget right now.
Austerity for sure, Carl. The thing is with the transportation budgets at the provincial and federal level, it is mostly capital funding, and we really need operational funding for this work. So the municipal, so this work, this funding for low-income transit passes and subsidized transit passes gets downloaded to cities, the towns.
In Alberta especially, the rural communities are left out of this. Like, because I work with disabilities, Uber and Lyft is not regulated. They don't have to be accessible. So as much as we like to see unique solutions and creative solutions on transportation demand, I caution you to make sure that you have accessible standards, especially if you're looking at health and equity of accessing public transit services that cost less. So that's just
safe and equitable, and yeah, accessible is very important. That.
Yeah.
Okay.
I guess we'll go to the next slide.
Yeah, I think so. I think we've exhausted that one.
So Gracie Cito, she's passed away, but one of her things she's infamous for was talking about the buses going by. I may as well be on it. So she was extremely passionate at council talking about that there's buses going by. So
we created we created a postcard with a mom and her 2 kids sitting at the bus stop in minus 20-degree weather, and you see the bus going by them. So it's quite shocking in some ways to see a public transit system where people can't get on it because of affordability.
And so that was kind of more like turning on the light. Since that kind of postcard approach, we've kind of used that tool, and we'll get into that in the next slide, but just on a ways to do more strong data collection for people that are in crisis that really don't have that time of day to kind of tell you their story. So we'll get into that later. Okay. We just put that picture of the choir, everybody singing from the song sheet, because same song sheet. That's so critical. Like, we have lots of different allies and coalition partners that we share our information with. And that's so critical that you're all on that same song sheet. Even with Edmonton, who also has a low-income transit pass, they still only have it at half price versus here we have the scale.
Right. We spend a lot of our time. With this work is spent at committee meetings or at meetings, strategizing about the issues. People from the community, people living on low income, bring the issues to the table, and we strategize about how to best respond. So we really spend a lot of time figuring out our response to this, and that's where this Robert really comes in. He's very important to our work because he helps us to understand each other better and to come up with a response that will work for both the city and the community. And that's really important, because if we're just coming in, we're not a group that stands outside with placards. We're a group that sits at the table with the city.
Although we have used placards.
We have, but we think that it's important to be at the table with the city, and we try to build a really respectful relationship with the city in order to ensure that both parties' needs are being met. Mm-hmm. So we spend a lot of time, as I said, strategizing, and then once we have a strategy that we're all agreeing on, it's critical that everyone, as Colleen says, is singing from the same song sheet, and we create community engagement packages where we have a sample letter that we create, and maybe a call to action letter that we send out far and wide with our key messages on it, and we create postcards and different tools in order to get the word out to the community. So our group Fair Fares, Fair Calgary Community Voices. We then do a mass mail out. They send it to their contacts, and on it goes, asking them to write or speak to their city councillors and to come to council and tell their stories. So that's kind of Colleen uses social media really well.
Yeah, and so a lot of our work, even though it's not particularly our value, like we see public transit as a human, a mobilization, right? The Enough for All strategy in Calgary, which is backed up by Vibrant Communities Calgary, as the convener of that plan, is very much the city sees it as a poverty reduction solution. We see beyond that it's a poverty issue. We see this as accessing your community, creating vital that everybody can use. Yeah, a public transportation system that's connected and affordable. And we have a very, I don't know about everybody here, but we have a very car-centric province, and they often, public transit is quite a fight to get properly funded for our city. So it's helpful to have really strong players like Vibrant Communities Calgary, who is the convener of the Enough for All strategy, to show council how this aligns with poverty reduction. However, we think it's a much bigger lens around citizenship, but also like a green communities and an environmental solution, and just a city that's connected. So we actually had a transit summit, and so all those partners, we have the Calgary Climate Hub attend, as well as there's a customer advisory group that came to that group. We had people with disabilities, students, and with the transit union, and then we also have a part of a larger group called Keep Calgary Strong, and they Common Alliance for
Common Good, yeah.
Common Good.
Alliance for Common Good, yeah.
And so that's also a large faith labor union group that's also has the same message, and so we help inform them as well.
Yeah, so we see this as part of a bigger collective and part of a bigger initiative to ensure that all people can get on the bus. Okay, I think we're...
Yeah, next slide, I guess.
Okay.
Are there any questions so far, or?
Okay.
So these are some of our storytellers. Like when we were asked who was a municipal leader, we feel these are the people that are municipal leaders. We think it's everyone, and we're not sure that was the intention of today, but how do you get city councilors' attention? And really how you get city councilors' attention is you let them know that these people are your constituents. And we've had one-on-one meetings with councilors who, within you make sure you bring somebody that is in their constituency, because then they listen. They kind of check out when they realize you're just this group that doesn't really reside in their area. They really want to see they're impacting the citizens that they're actually responsible for.
People buying the bus or buying the pass are definitely our storytellers. Agencies are really important to be able to tell their stories. I mean, they are the sometimes the voice of the people that they serve and support, and so their stories and their information is really important. And they can look at the low-income transit pass and transit in general from a bigger lens than perhaps the individuals that are buying the pass. So they're really important storytellers that come to City Council and tell stories on behalf of the people that they serve. We had one lady that represented an organization here called Sunrise Link, and she came one time and told a story about a fellow that they served, that when the transit pass was at $44 a month, he wasn't able to purchase a pass on every month. He only was able to get that money together once in a while. So he managed to get a job, and he was pretty excited about that. The next month he couldn't buy a transit pass, and he had been very discouraged in the past about getting transit passes, and unfortunately he committed suicide. He was just had been very impacted by the struggle that he was experiencing, not only with the transit pass, but just poverty in general. And so it was a very moving story that that Tracy came and told the City Council.
Yeah, I guess we can go on to the next slide. So this is just some examples of some of the tools.
Did we have a question or no? Okay.
So again, we mentioned something about postcards. So instead of just a postcard that goes directly to the MLA, this postcard, you can tell a story and take a picture. We took a picture of that. We had about 250 entries of these postcards, and they were organized by postal code. And we could tailor that to the provincial level or to the municipal level. So just not just sending these cards off is an order way to create a nice database that. And then, of course, the city had a survey on fair entry, just monitoring its progress. So right now, so if people didn't know, the sliding scale impacts about 67,000 Calgarians. About half of those people, because they've got this really great database that the Neighborhood Services runs, they know half of them are living below $12,000 a year. As well, we also have a coloring sheet so we can get children to tell their story. And I mentioned earlier, that's a photo from our recent transit summit where we did some more data collection, and that's a picture of Robert Wells there just writing down what can we do better, what needs to change to help us do some more strategic planning on what's our next steps. And then you'll just see a result here, the sliding scale gets people where they need to go. So 75% agree that they're now able to go to the different places compared to before. We also had some nice rich data on how many people mentioned work. And so when we talked to the Minister of Community Social Services, Raja Dasani, we said, look, 30% of the people that are using the sliding scale use it for work. So this complements your provincial strategy on securing employment. So there's lots of ways you can use postcards or drawings, which seem just to create surveys, and so that's helpful. Mm-hmm. And then you'll see it down in the bottom corner of that particular image of the building, a city that moves. So our city strategy, we just cite different parts of the plan that this aligns with. And so when we have an affordable transit pass, we say it's complementary to a city that moves. So again, it's just aligning the strategies and the goals and the intentions that work with existing policies.
I think that it's important to mention that we have just finished a provincial campaign, and we have the UCP government in place in Alberta. And right now they're looking at cutting education, human services, and yet they came to the table with funding for the sliding scale. So that was a huge win for us to be able to have the provincial government step up. What they did was, there was 2017 to 2019, they had a pilot project that ends in December 2019. So we had a big campaign to ask the provincial government to continue their funding past 2019, and so we have a new government, the UCP, and we were very pleased that they came and decided to continue funding the sliding scale, and for the reasons that Colleen just mentioned, that the sliding scale gets people on the bus, gets them off the streets, sometimes gets them work, gets them to the family, gets them to the very important community programs that sometimes they just can't get to, gets them to medical appointments and hospitals instead of having to use an ambulance. So it's really important that I think the UCP really saw the value of the sliding scale and came forward with the 4.5 million for Calgary and 4.5 million for Edmonton.
Yeah, and so it's critical to take your message to that level of government, because often if you talk about poverty at the city level, the councillors will look at us and say, well, that's a provincial issue, so why are we even funding a provincial issue, right? So that's their mandate, and they're downloading to the city. So you have to really tailor your message to what level of government you're talking with. So we have to really make sure that we say this is like, people from all across the city use this pass, so they don't see this as just for people downtown. So it's really important to get that kind of data to really add a human face to that, but also aligns with a city mandate, not just a provincial mandate. So those postcards we were able to kind of tweak to which audience we're talking with.
One of the benefits we were able to tell the city about is that the sliding scale has reduced fare evasion quite significantly, we understand, which is great for the city, but it's also really important for the people that use the transit system, that they're not having to get on the bus and not pay because they don't have a ticket, or a bus pass.
And one of the transit union told us that actually sliding scale prevents conflict at the fare box. So we were able to take that story and say you're keeping your driver safe because you have a sliding scale, because then there's just less fights.
Yeah, less
but we're very thankful that City Calgary has a policy for drivers. If they see fit, they can let that person on even if they don't have that transit pass. So it's really critical to look at aligning, not just because not everybody buys a bus pass, to make sure that there's a crisis response. So like there's still those tickets available, and there's a policy like that where it's up to the driver just to make sure they're safe and everybody else is on the bus is safe.
I don't know what our next slide is. I just wanted to.
I think it's our last slide.
Okay, I just wanted to then mention that two things to kind of close is that I think that it's really important to stay issue focused. It's very easy for grassroots committees and other groups to get off track and not complete the project, or to move on to other things that might be a little bit easier. So if you have a specific ask or a specific project that you're working on, it's really important to stay really focused on that, because other people will come in and try and kind of go off of your original ask. So that's important, and also to remain action oriented. It's easy to have meetings just for the sake of having meetings and continue to admire the problem instead of trying to find solutions and to figure out ways to move forward with that, strategies and solutions once you've come up with them.
Wait, sorry, that's the last slide that we were on.
Oh, yeah, there we go. One more.
So you'll just see that's the story from Tracy that Bonnie was speaking about. And then, yeah, I think we've kind of touched on those already. So, yeah, I think it's hard to see that we're successful, to be honest. Like, we've been doing this for 20 years, but each year, like, we're constantly at council. Like, it's not something that you got a policy in place and the work is done. Every year we're there trying to fight for this pass. It's never ending.
It feels like it's never ending work. Yeah.
So we get challenged with fatigue and doing data collection, where people are like, well, I just told you the story, why are you asking me again? So try to avoid that. So we're very thankful that we have a group of citizens that aren't afraid of going to council and are very good at speaking to their reality.
We just had our last city council meeting that we spoke at a couple weeks ago. We had 3 people that were homeless that were speaking, and their stories were powerful. And
but that wasn't because of us. That was because of one of our members had a really nice relationship with the client action group. So they trusted her. So then that gave them the freedom to then speak because of that. So it's really about relationships. If you had to really bubble it down to how to be successful, and you all probably know this, it's about relationships and maintaining that relationships and being as respectful as you can. Is like, as much as sometimes we are frustrated with council, being respectful is, we try our best. There's an undertone of anger at times.
Of course, and there is that tension. I mean, you can't just say that everything is rosy, because there has to have tension. You have to have tension in order to create change. Change doesn't happen without tension. But the other thing that's really important is that the city staff also come to us with issues and concerns as we go to them. So we have a really good relationship with them.
Thank you. Thank you, Bonnie and Colleen. You shared some really important strategies and learnings. I'm going to, I don't want to forget that there was a question in the chat box from Suzanne around this was about the sliding scale. Do you get pushback from the city that with the sliding scale they're losing revenues?
Yes, a great deal, yes.
That's our biggest frustration, is that how the city measures the budget, how they determine how much money the sliding scale costs, is that they take the money that they would have made originally from, say, they're using actually, which is really good now, the 50% of the sliding scale, and they're subtracting the amount of money that a person pays, say for instance in Band A, which is $5.35. So they're losing the difference between $44 and $5.35. And we're continually saying to City Council, a person that makes $12,000 a year would never ever be able to buy a bus pass for $44. So you're not losing revenue, you're gaining revenue.
I think the luxury of, say, a smaller center, it's not that hard to go to a smart card fare system. So we know that smaller centers, they can actually track ridership data, where in Calgary, we've got inherited our own problems, but they don't do really good data set counting. They do 2 counts a year, and then they base it on sales. So not on true ridership data. So that's become our advantage, and we challenge them on that, saying, until you have the smart card, you're not going to know how people are using this pass. So yes, it's definitely a challenge, and this is why we have to now fight for a 6.5 million revenue loss. But we're really doubting if we had sliding scale, would those people be buying a $105 pass? We doubt that. So we're fighting because we don't think it's fair to have a crisis response only for people that are in absolute poverty. So I do think that council's sympathetic to a sliding scale, but it's that's why it was so critical to have that database from Community Neighborhood Services, who actually understands the root causes of poverty. 10 years back, this data was only handled by Calgary Transit, and it was frustrating because we didn't know the data. We had to have the monthly meetings with them saying what's happening now. But because the Neighborhood Services database is in Neighborhood Services and has that mandate to address poverty and even just harm reduction at the counter, connecting people to social services, they're able to share that more openly. We still actually have a barrier of that data being available to work with, say, community members, because we have a really nice economist from the United Way, and there's still some, if you can, try and make sure that your databases could be shared with community, so you can use that data to your advantage.
And can I just add something that we talk about how do we make the financial argument, and we always end up making the social argument, that it's the right thing to do based on a number of things that we've talked about, because we can't make the economic argument that they're not going to change their idea that they are going to count this as a revenue loss. So we always have to use this as a social argument.
Yeah, an investment in social.
Investment in social, yeah. Social.
Thank you. Okay, so I'm just going to throw it. I know that we're coming up to the hour right now, so I want to just throw it out to people if there's any questions or any comments. We may have to follow up with some questions as well. Any questions from the group or thoughts? Or I know that I think Connie talked about the national transportation strategy.
Sorry, it's Colleen. This is Bonnie. But maybe put our names together.
No, I know who you are. Yeah, sorry. Did I say Bonnie? I'm sorry.
Colleen. And
Colleen. Yeah.
Sorry, Al, what was the question?
It was basically, I'm just throwing out it to the group if there's any questions or comments or insights people want to share. I know that we do have to wrap up, but we could also follow up if there's any questions via email, any kind of follow-up. We will actually send a follow-up with these slides and the notes for the session.
You're going to stay sleepy, Bob.
Hello.
Sorry, Suzanne, could you say that again? We didn't hear.
Oh, I think it's right.
Oh, okay, good, all right.
It could be that, yeah, she didn't realize she wasn't on mute, maybe. Okay, we're gonna move along. I just wanted to just mention before people get off is that we had rearranged this call for November. It was originally planned for October, and now we shifted it to November. I'm wondering the next call we have scheduled for December 17th. That is pretty late coming up to holiday time. I'm wondering if people are interested in kind of shifting that into the new year as we set dates. Typically we try to meet bi-monthly. Does anyone have any objections? I might just put that out to the group. The next one, we're going to be talking about engaging in the business sector over the long term, and we'll be looking for some speakers or a speaker to share on that topic. Okay, we'll move on. I know people are hopping off because it's just after 2 o'clock. So we've got a couple upcoming webinars. The next one, November 25th, is on engagement with people who've lived and living experience. And we have another one about asking our communities a journey to understand participation and involvement. As well as in December, the next convener call will be about reorientation, about our membership and the benefits of membership. So thank you everyone for joining us today. Thank you especially to Bonnie and Colleen for joining us and sharing all the work that's happening around Calgary and its transit system. I made quite a lot of notes from this session. You really highlighted a lot of key areas and important strategies for transit going forward. I think it's opening up some questions and opportunities for reflection. So thank you so much. Everyone, please feel free to get in touch if you have any follow-up questions. And that will be it for today. So thank you so much. We'll speak to everybody soon. Take care. Have a good day.